the Celtics get bombed by Toronto. What do we read into it? Keith Smith, Yahoo, Celtics blog. He joins us now. Real GM. He does it all over the NBA and here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. You know, I was thinking of you last night when I was watching that game on how interesting this conversation could be today to watch this Celtics team, which, by the way, Keith, is now 9.5 games out of first place. They're 2 games behind the Sixers all of a sudden. What is going on with this Celtics team? And not forget the game last night. Are there other underlining issues with this roster right now?
Yeah. What's going on is nothing good. They're just not a happy team. They're not a group that is very well connected. It feels like a team that has very much come from a place where everyone really got along. They were really playing for each other over the last 3-4 years. And now it's become a group where it seems like it's a whole bunch of individuals, whether it's veterans who have concerns about their upcoming free agency or young guys who are trying to find their own way in the NBA. It's just not a connected group, and it's the results are showing on the floor. You know, really, especially, you know, with how inconsistent they are. They can go from looking like the best team in the league to a team that's lucky to be in the playoffs night to night.
Yeah, Keith, they are 56% winning percentage with Kyrie versus 82% when he doesn't play. I mean, is there something more to read into that?
Yeah, I'm not going to put too much of that on Kyrie. This team has been, for whatever reason, they're better the more guys who are out of the lineup. That was, really the entire story for all of last season was, all right, take this guy out, we're okay. Take this guy out, guess what? We got even better. And we've seen that go into, or carry into this season here where it's been, all right, these guys miss games, we're fine, we're going to play like the game heading into the All-Star break where they played without Kyrie and won in Philadelphia. It's just, for whatever reason, these guys seem to do better when you take a couple guys off the floor. I don't know if that guys are more settled. They know they're going to get minutes and shots and, be in a position to contribute or what it is. But for whatever reason, that's, been the case, now going at least a couple years running.
What is the Sixers fans here will say Boston has the Sixers number. They don't match up well. Stevens, gets the better of Brown. Why is there a disparity in the matchup at Toronto?
Yeah, it's really funny because you would like to say it's because of matchups, but they've struggled no matter kind of what team the Celtics have and what team the Raptors have. One of the problems for a long time was that the Raptors did a better job of hunting Isaiah Thomas and putting him in mismatches, and we're starting to see them take a similar approach with different personnel, but doing that with Kyrie Irving to the point where the Celtics moved him completely off the ball, had him covering Danny Green for a long stretch, put Jason Tatum on to Kyle Lowry to start the second half. It obviously didn't work. It didn't get them what they needed, but it's one of those things where they just do not match up well with Toronto based on no matter what the personnel on the floor is, and they just cannot crack winning games in Toronto.
We're talking with Keith Smith, covers the NBA, Yahoo Sports. He joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Sixers have the night off. They got a couple of injuries. We'll dive into them in a little bit. We want to talk some more about this Eastern Conference with the Celtics losing to Toronto last night. Celtics, by the way, 37-24. They're 9.5 games out of the first seed in the East. They're 2 back of the Sixers now. They've lost 3 in a row. Do you feel Kyrie the other day said, "We'll be fine because I'm here." We've done this before. We got this. Do you buy that, or does this team have too many issues, or is he right? Like, calm down. I always make the argument on this show, Keith, and people accuse me of being too laid back and like, whatever. I always, my thing is, look, it's a Tuesday night in February. Like, whatever happens on Tuesdays in February, January, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't carry – that game on a Tuesday night doesn't define who you are. But is Boston being defined by this regular season, or do you say, listen, they are Boston, they'll be fine once April comes around?
Yeah, to some extent you can say that hey, it doesn't really matter. It's not the the end of the world. But in that, getting blown out by the Raptors in Toronto or losing a game by a point to Milwaukee in Milwaukee, those the end of the world. That happens to all sorts of teams. It's getting blown out by the Bulls. It's losing games to the Phoenix Suns at home. You can't write off all the quote-unquote good losses when you have so many bad ones on your ledger as well. That's been the problem. Now, Kyrie is right, but Kyrie's also leaning on the experience of, well, I got LeBron James, and LeBron's going to make it happen, and there's no way he's going to let this thing fall apart. Now, he's got to be that guy, and I'm not quite sure he's looking at it with the same lens everybody else is. I think it's fair for those fans who have worry to have that worry, because this team right now, they're just as composed. They're just another okay, good, but not good enough NBA team.
Yeah, right now, 5th in the East. And let me ask you, if they finish 5th in the East, I mean, are they a team that you can envision getting knocked out in the first round?
I have trouble seeing them getting knocked out in the first round. The only reason I say that is because they have played very, very well against good teams. I believe they are, as it stands today, 15-12 against the other teams that are in the Eastern Conference playoff race. And other than last night's blowout loss, they really have not lost anything but close games in those other games. So they played well against the good competition. It's been those nights where they take the night off and get bombed by a terrible team, which obviously you're not going to see in the playoffs. So I think they will still win in the first round, but the question then becomes is, can they put together a consistent enough effort to win over the 2-month period you need to in the playoffs? And that I'm not quite sure I'm willing to go there yet.
That's such a fascinating – it's almost a mirror discussion, Keith, that goes on here with Philly. And it's funny. It's even nights when the Sixers win, people aren't happy. They should have blown the Heat out. Why is the game close? Oh, they barely beat the Pelicans. That team stinks. Why is that game close? Like, the Sixers have won 3 out of 4, and people complain that the games are too close.
Yeah, I think it is what people like being the underdogs, and then they like being the team on the come up. It's once you have expectations, it's a terrible thing. For outside of the NBA, I'm a massive New England Patriots fan. It's where I grew up.
We're hanging up on you. We're hanging up on you.
Well, hey, you guys got one over us, so you're all right. But for me, I come back to it with, I have that same kind of attitude of, man, what are we doing? And, great, we won by 3. So I get where people come from, but then when my rational brain kicks over, I'm like, they still won. Can't you just be happy with that? Especially considering where both of these franchises were not all that long ago.
Well, and the narrative comes into play. It's, okay, like, I'm the guy that says, I don't care what the score is. You win by 40, great. You win by 1, great. The people will be like, well, the fact that you're struggling against the Heat is a trend that keeps happening, meaning if you're struggling against mediocre and bad teams, what's going to happen when you play Boston, Toronto, Milwaukee, and I guess let's throw in Indiana? They seemingly aren't going to go away here. So I think there's where the fear is. Like, if you're struggling against Miami and New Orleans, what makes you feel confident that you can beat those 4 teams?
Yeah, and I get that where people come from. But again, Philly and Boston, a lot of parallels there between the two franchises. And when you look at it, it's, you struggled, but then you went out and you beat the Warriors in Oakland, if I remember correctly. So it kind of comes back to, like, well, what does that say? Doesn't that tell you more about what you might do than struggling but still beating, a Miami team? I start to, look at those things because I hear the same thing all the time from Celtics fans of, if we can't beat the Chicago Bulls, how are we going to beat the Milwaukee Bucks? And but you did beat the Bucks, and you beat them pretty handily. So what does that all of a sudden not count anymore? It gets really tough. I guess it comes down to whether you want to be optimistic or pessimistic about your team's chances.
Yeah, and it's funny. I threw that out the other day, Keith. Keith Smith, Yahoo NBA, with us here, real GM, that the Sixers won at Golden State, okay? You can't have a more impressive victory, can you? Winning at Golden State might be the most difficult thing to do in the NBA, and the Sixers went there and won. And I believe it feels like that game gave them no street cred. They got bupkis on that, and people look at beating Miami barely and beating New Orleans barely in a bigger concern than they do beating Golden State on the road. It's almost mind-boggling to how people can come up to that.
Yeah, I've never really understood that, side of things. And it wasn't a case where they went in and played one of those games where the Warriors, sat a bunch of guys and really just kind of threw it away.
There was no Klay Thompson, by the way. No Klay in that game.
Sure. But everybody goes through periods like that, and in the season where they're missing a guy, to show me the team that's been fully healthy for 82 games, and there isn't one. So, that's I have a lot of trouble with the, well, we barely won this game or we lost to this team, so there's no way we can beat these other teams, when a lot of these teams do have these wins on their record, on the record today.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at it and you start looking at it and say, well, they haven't beaten anybody good, well, then that is a problem. If you're one of these teams that's right around the fringes of the playoffs and against the other playoff teams, you've won 2 or 3 games, yeah, that is an issue that you need to look into. But for Philly and Boston, it kind of, in a way, it seems like a little bit of hand-wringing where I don't know that there needs to be.
Yeah, by the way, I think Philly, after the win over New Orleans the other night, is 18-7 against the West. That's the third best record in the NBA against Western Conference opponents, which, they swept Denver. They beat Golden State. They beat Houston. They swept the Jazz. I think they swept the Clippers. I mean, they've got some pretty impressive wins, but people focus on those games. Let me ask you about Stevens. Here he could do no wrong. When he coaches against Brown, he beats him upside down 2 times on Sunday. Is he part of this team's struggles right now? And what is it about playing Toronto, essentially, that maybe that he factors in, if at all?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of this falls at his feet, because when you look at it and they still don't really have an identity and guys don't know their roles, and that comes back on the coach. And last night's game was a perfect example. They were up 34-30, and then over the span of about the next 5 minutes, the Raptors went on an 18-0 run. Stevens didn't call a timeout until that run was at 13-0. And that's one of the things that he takes probably the most heat for. He's a little old school in the sense of he likes to conserve his timeouts, and he likes to let his guys play through these runs and figure it out on the floor. But there's times when that just doesn't work. You can't do that. In time and time again this season, the Celtics have gotten these runs against him where they've just been blitzed, and he just kind of sits there and says, all right, guys, figure it out, and it doesn't happen. So that's, one big thing that comes against him. The other is just, there's guys who are, Terry Rozier, for example, comes in and he still plays like the guy who was the starting point guard last year with a lot of free reign to do what he needed to do, and he just hasn't had a good season, and there's been no dialing back of his minutes, no dialing back of his role, nothing like that. No, those seem to be things that at this point, that's really on Stevens to figure out, and he continually says, this is on me, I need to be better. But we haven't seen that this year. So it's, the expectations are obviously weighing on him as well, just as they are on the players.
Yeah, it's funny you say that 18-0 run. He took the timeout after 13-0. You probably remember that's the run or similar run that Boston went on Philly last year, where Brown got criticized for not calling the timeout in that game 1. It was.
Yeah, it was. It is similar, and it's funny because Brett Brown comes from the Pop coaching tree, and that's something that Pop does is, hey, figure it out, play through it. Stevens doesn't come from that tree, but obviously draws some level of inspiration from the Pop coaching tree. He does a lot of things that the Pop and his guys do. So one of the things you look at there is, yeah, well, Pop does that because for the entirety of his success, he had Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili for almost all of that run. Yeah, it's okay to let those guys play through it. It's not the end of the world with those guys. When you're trusting a bunch of 20 to 25-year-olds, yeah, you probably need to step in a little bit more.
Keith Smith, Yahoo NBA. Let me get your take. I just mentioned Indiana. Are you ready to say they're in this thing, or are they going to fade?
No, they're going to stay in it. One of the reasons is, it's funny. I just talked about teams, the Celtics, not knowing what their roles are. The Pacers all know what their roles are, and they didn't change those without Victor Oladipo. Everybody was asked to maybe do a little more, but the role stays the same. When you see guys like Bojan Bogdanovic, they're saying, hey, all right, we need you to score a little bit more for us. And he says, okay, I can take a few more shots per game. Wesley Matthews filled that Oladipo spot, really, really well on the bio market because he's going to play defense just like Oladipo does, gives you a lot of that, and he's going to knock down open jump shots, but he knows what he is. He's not going to go out there and try and, handle the ball and, make a bunch of plays off the dribble and those kind of things because that's not who he is. That team's very well coached. They play very hard. They also are built to win down the stretch and in the playoffs because their success is not based on unsustainable shooting or all kinds of crazy pace. They just, hang in there and do what they do from game to game. So I don't think they're going away anytime soon.
That would be a major wrench, right? I mean, if they stay in the 3 spot or even just fall down to 4, one of those top 4 teams that everybody perceived is going to be in some first-round trouble, right?
Yeah, you're going to, at that point, you've got either, Boston or Philly is, it makes their road that much harder. Winning on the road in the playoffs is one of the things that coaches will tell you is one of the hardest things to do in the entire NBA. It's winning those games on the road. Now, we've seen those really great teams, the Warriors or some of those, Lakers teams or those Heat teams where, all right, we can throw a game away because whatever, but these teams aren't those teams. So they're going to have to go on the road and win big games and not only do it in the second round in the conference finals, they're going to have to do it right from the jump, one of those two.
I think that is the whole Indiana thing is interesting. If they get a 3-6 and they end up, they're going to play Brooklyn most likely in that first round, they would advance on. That 4-5, you would lose a Philly-Boston in the first round, which would make, I don't know about you, but would there be big changes for either one of those teams if they bounce in the first round?
Yeah, and I think there might be anyway. I think even if, let's say, we get to the conference semis and you've got Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, and Philly in some form of 2 matchups there. 2 of those 4 teams are going to leave disappointed, and I think those 2 teams are really going to look at it and say, all right, what do we need to do differently this summer to put a team together for next year that is better equipped to have this not happen to us again?
Yeah, I mean, especially probably more so. Let me ask you this then, okay? I don't want to sound biased because people will think I am. If Boston or Philly lost in the first round, who's more disappointed?
I think it'd definitely have to be Boston. The only reason I say that is because they had legitimate championship-level aspirations where I think if you could get the right folks with Philly to be honest with you, I think they would say, we're good and we're getting there, but we're probably a year away from that level. Where the Celtics were a bad shooting night in a Game 7 from going to the NBA Finals, it added Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward to that roster, and many in Boston assumed, all right, well, we'll see in June because that's when this thing really matters, and obviously it hasn't gone that way. So I think that team would be disappointed, and I think at that point you very much run the risk of Kyrie Irving saying, yeah, this didn't really work out the way I wanted to. I'm going to go, ply my wares elsewhere next season.
Keith Smith was with us here as the NBA season continuing on. The Sixers tomorrow night. They are at Oklahoma City. They will not have Embiid. They will not have Boban, so going to be a tough one there. Then Saturday night they play the Warriors. Embiid's status up in the air, so we'll have to check in there, as this week goes on a little bit more. But let's get your take on that Western Conference real fast, because Denver seemingly is not going away. They're almost like the Pacers of the West, like people just don't want to believe in them. They don't want to believe. But you tweeted last night, they're almost like the Celtics were supposed to be. They're deep and they're fun and they can score. Do you think that Denver is a legit Western Conference finalist?
Yeah, I can definitely see them making it to the West Finals. I don't think they can beat Golden State. The important thing to remember with Denver is this group hasn't even made the playoffs yet. for all that they're sitting in second right now, they didn't even make the postseason last year. They lost out on the last day of the regular season. So they've had a great year and they can make it. But asking them to beat the Warriors and go to the finals, that's a whole different thing you're asking for. But I think they can get there. Then I think you're looking at them as, again, what the Celtics were supposed to be is, all right, hey, we're right there. We're a piece or two away, some growth from our younger guys, and we're right in this thing next year.
Yeah, they got Isaiah Thomas back too, and I wonder, adding him, does that make them, thinking about what we're talking about, make them a legitimate Western Conference finalist there? I think they're very interesting to watch. Over in the West, though, it seems that, I don't know, are you buying into Houston? Have they figured it out a little bit? Portland is always that team that has a nice regular season. I like what they bring, but they don't have a lot of playoff success. Oklahoma City, Paul George is playing at an unbelievably high level. It just feels that there's less teams that can upset somebody this year. It seems that Golden State's path is a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it is a little easier than it has been in past years. I do buy the Rockets, though. I think that they have got a roster here where I think a lot of what their issues have been is health related. They've just been missing guys in and out of the lineup for several months now. They really haven't been fully healthy, and they're still the team that can, they have the path and the formula to coming as close to beating the Warriors as anybody else does. And I think that they are as confident. We just saw them beat them just go fairly recently here. So I think, looking at the Rockets, they're there. Oklahoma City, they've got to pick up and figure out the defense a little bit more in order to get there. And they're a very good defensive team, but they really need one more guy, and they just struggle to defend the Warriors' bigs with the guys that they have right now. So that's a little bit of a challenge for the Thunder. But it's still the Warriors' conference by far and away.
Boston, Portland tonight in Boston. So Boston on the back-to-back, back at home. Do we learn anything about the Celtics tonight?
Yeah, if they don't come out tonight with one of their best efforts of the season, meaning actual effort, like they're flying around, they're executing switches, they're going to the floor for loose balls, they're hitting the boards, they're banging bodies. If they don't come out with an effort like that, the Boston fan base is going to turn on this team, and they will turn on them very, very quickly tonight. If they come out and play the way they did in Toronto, the Boo Birds are going to rain big and loud down on this Celtics team. So I would expect them to give one of their better efforts of the year tonight against Portland and, try and get this thing back on track with a win.
No Baines tonight. Rozier questionable, so we'll see. Boston and Portland. That one should be fun for the Sixer fans to kind of chew on. Portland has owned the Sixers this year. They smoked them twice. And, of course, Boston has owned the Sixers for about 6 years, it seems like. Keith Smith joins us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, contributor for Yahoo Sports, Real GM, Celtics blog, and the front office show on the podcast. You can listen to that and follow him at Keith Smith NBA. Thanks, pal.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.